Hello, everybody. My name is Kristen Bushka, and I'm a Senior Vice President of Within 3. So I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank you for attending our session and to welcome you to Optimizing Teams and Timelines, Virtual Engagement Best Practices. Okay, so for today's agenda, I'm going to start out by just providing you with a very brief overview of the different types of virtual engagements that you can participate in. After doing that, we're going to go into 2 live presentations. One is regarding the use of asynchronous or overtime engagement, which I will be discussing more in detail with you shortly, and then a hybrid approach, which is using asynchronous engagement in combination with a live meeting. If at any time you have any questions while these presentations are occurring, or if you need any additional clarification on something that may have been mentioned, please feel free to enter a question in the chat feature, because after the presentations have concluded, we'll go ahead and have a Q&A session and discuss some of those questions in more detail with you. Okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit about modern discussion venues. So as I'm sure you are aware of, we have what are called real-time meetings. And pre-COVID, probably a lot of your engagements occurred in a live in-person setting. Since COVID, a lot of that type of engagement has had to transition over to webcasts. Regardless of which type of live meeting you've participated in, everybody who engaged had to be available at the same time on the same date. And for those who are participating in in-person locations, obviously everybody had to be in that same vicinity. On the opposite side, you have what's called asynchronous or overtime meetings. What that means is everybody has the ability to participate when it's convenient for them to do so over the course of a set amount of time. So that way, if you have meetings or if you have family obligations, you have that flexibility to participate when it's convenient for you to do so. So basically, how does this all work? So online sessions occur online. So as long as you have an electronic device with internet access, you're able to log in and participate in an overtime session. So I'm sure you're all familiar with an advisory board. Pre-COVID, those were occurring in an in-person setting. Because we can't meet together right now, a lot of companies are deciding to use an asynchronous platform in order to be able to engage with their KOLs. So for example, if you had a live advisory board, you might want to conduct that on an asynchronous platform over the course of 2 weeks. So very similar to what you would see in a live meeting, you will have your advisors and you will have your moderators discussing and engaging with each other in this online session. So you would have what you see here, a list of posted questions. So your advisors would be able to go in and provide their responses. But then you would be able to take that a step further and actually have them engaging with each other and the moderator. So our platform, for example, has key engagement features such as responding to comments or tagging other users in questions or responses. This allows you to really get an engaged conversation going among your participants, which is ultimately going to get you more of those insights that you're looking to collect. So that's the basic feature of how this asynchronous platform works. And asynchronous sessions are occurring all over the enterprise. Clinical R&D teams, medical affairs, commercial teams, they're all using it to not only engage with external stakeholders, but with internal colleagues as well. So you might want to reach out to some of your KOLs, and perhaps you have a document that you want to receive their feedback on. You could use that in an asynchronous platform. If you have, for example, internal colleagues where you want to collect insights from them, or you want them to all work on a document and collaborate together, you can use this type of platform as well. So those are just some examples that you can use asynchronous engagement, but it is across the enterprise with, again, both internal and external stakeholders. So with that, I would like to introduce to you our first duo or pair of presenters. Sherri So is the Senior Medical Science Liaison at Cara Therapeutics, and Silke Anderson is my colleague as Senior Director of Client Success at Within 3. So Sherri and Silke, I hand it over to you.
Thank you so much. So in Cara Therapeutics Medical Affairs Department, we had previously scheduled to host a live ad board at a conference in May in 2020 to a group of healthcare professionals. And of course, the purpose of the ad board, as with many ad boards, was to bring a group of experts to discuss clinical data, disease state education, and collect insights in preparation for a product launch happening very soon in early 2021. Unfortunately, COVID forced the conference and pretty much every conference to go virtual, leading to search for a virtual platform to host this specific ad board. So there was many challenges and to address, including not only COVID, but the inability to travel, considerations of multiple time zones, and work at home capabilities. The team wanted to choose a program that would allow advisors to enter and exit the program at any time of the day, at any day of the week. We also considered whether to go with a live presentation online or do sort of on-demand videos pre-recorded. Next slide. So the solution was to conduct an MSL-led 2-week asynchronous session. We had reformatted some of the ad board questions that were going to be presented live into a platform appropriate open-ended thread. And this was to enable the participants as well as the moderators to have a continuous conversation over a 2-week period of time. So the medical science liaisons in our team were asked to target a wide range of advisors from different healthcare settings to represent the diverse field within the country. So instead of live videos, we actually pre-recorded presentations to enhance the engagement experience. And lastly, with all ad boards, we wanted to have an executive summary created for internal stakeholders as well as the executive team. Next slide. And as with many virtual engagements, the team wanted to add a personal touch to the videos, especially during a time of quarantine and lack of travel. We felt that it would make a lot of the advisors more comfortable and get to know us as a team face to face, even without doing it live. So what we did was the presenters had provided a video introduction and closing thank yous in addition to the contact and the data presentation. And we all had sort of taken our own personal approach. Many of us used our own iPhones, and some of us even used our iPads to do the recordings. And since the videos were pre-recorded, we actually came up with presentations that were really clean and that were much shorter than if it was going to be a live presentation. And we thought it was much shorter and cleaner because it didn't have any of the interruptions or connection issues that we are often interacting with on a day-to-day basis when it comes to a live presentation. So once the program did go live, I had actually moderated throughout the entire 2-week period. And the moderator of an asynchronous program has the ability to answer and pose questions throughout, as well as further expand and connect with the advisors on a day-to-day basis. And of course, in a live ad board, the attendees are also able to get to know each other and have sort of a continuous conversation. We wanted to sustain that type of environment in this asynchronous online platform. So the advisors, even though they couldn't be in the same room, they were able to read each other's thread and enabled to have a conversation with one another by posing questions, by having conversations throughout the thread, and continue to have a virtual dialogue for the 2-week period. And I think this is important to highlight in an asynchronous program versus a live program, where as now we often are part of a live program where there might be a chat box on the side or the ability for the attendees to get on camera and ask questions. But as many of us already know, it can be a little awkward. And a lot of the attendees don't like going on camera. So having the thread and the comment and the dialogue appropriateness and the ability really enabled the advisors to have quite an extensive conversation with one another. Next slide. And now I'm going to hand it over to Silka to go over the session metrics.
Thanks, Sherri. So while the ultimate success of an advisory board is measured by the information gathered and the relationships built, the participation metrics really do speak to how these results were obtained. Cara saw 100% participation from all the advisors in this session, with 20 questions gleaning over 300 responses. And this is largely due to the fact that for each question, they went in and the moderator had at least 3 follow-up questions and comments, resulting in over 15 responses per question throughout the session. So this was really indicative of the involvement that the moderators had and the dialogue that they created within. Next slide. And with that, I'll let Sherri speak to the actual results they realized.
Thanks, Silka. So the results of this ad board included, of course, many insights that were generated, which is, of course, the purpose of an ad board, in bringing the experts together. And some of these insights were very critical to our pre-launch activity, including information regarding the data, any type of sub-analyses in phase 3B, and 4 considerations for the medical affairs team. And as a team, we will continue to apply some of these insights into our educational materials, as well as some of the other activities that are that go into a pre-launch mode for a medical affairs team. We also received extremely positive feedback from the advisors, and you can see one of those advisors' quotes in the green box. Overall, the advisors really loved the format, the fact that they can independently go in and out whenever they pleased at any time of the day, at any day of the week. We saw that the activities were very random. We assumed that many would go into the program and answer questions at night, but that wasn't always the case. There were many advisors who went in throughout the day, maybe even during their lunch breaks. Some went into the platform very late at night, very early in the day. So that independence was a very positive thing for many of the advisors, especially those who are quarantined or who are at home and have their kids with them and other things that are affecting their ability to access programs. So we like the program so much that we are actually currently developing an asynchronous virtual ad board with a completely different group of healthcare professionals that we will be hosting in early December. Next slide.
So what were some of the key learnings related to best practices that we realized within this session? First of all, Sherri and her team embarked on the session with some clearly defined goals and objectives, not only related to the information they were looking to gather, but also the relationships they wanted to build. They set clear expectations with their advisors regarding the engagement, making sure that they avoided the yes, no answers and returned to the platform often to dialogue with the moderators and their colleagues. The number of questions and the time frame for the session, which was 11 days, were taken into careful consideration to avoid advisor fatigue. And then with the videos added, Cara really integrated a personal touch and made the session more dynamic versus just throwing questions out there. And then lastly, through the high level of moderation, the group engaged and re-engaged over the course of the session. And this is truly a lesson in having some moderator prompts and follow-up questions in your back pocket so that you can consistently go back in and draw your advisors back into the conversation. Next slide. So with that, thank you so much, Sherri and all, for listening, and I will turn it back over to Kristen.
Thank you, Silka, and thank you, Sherri. That was such a very insightful presentation. So thank you so much for sharing your insights collected from your virtual engagement with us. Before we move over into the next presentation, I just wanted to briefly touch upon, so you just heard Sherri and Silka talk about engaging in an asynchronous session, but you can also utilize the hybrid approach, which is using asynchronous in combination with a live meeting. So sometimes if you have, say, again, a virtual advisory board, maybe you want to have a pre-read session first where you can share some materials or documents with your advisors and have them read it on the Asynchronous platform, and then perhaps ask them a few questions regarding those materials. You can then take those insights and build further upon your discussions in the live meeting. Or on the flip side, you might want to start with a live meeting first and then delve further into conversations on the asynchronous platform. So as most of you have probably experienced by now, there is a sense of Zoom fatigue out there. So rather than having a virtual ad board that would be an 8-hour webcast or even a 4-hour webcast, you could do 1 to 2 hours of a live meeting, and then you could use the asynchronous platform to follow up, which is where the majority of your conversation would unfold. And again, that allows your participants that flexibility to participate when it's convenient for them to do so. And again, they don't have to sit and participate in a 4 or 8 hour live meeting. So based on that information, I am now going to pass this over to Sandra Amaya, who is the AFC Medical Manager at Astellas, and my other colleague, Veronica Barranco, who's the Senior Director of Client Success at Within3. They recently completed a study using this hybrid approach, so they're going to be able to talk to you about this method in more detail.
Thank you. Thank you, Christy. This year, please, next slide. Okay. This year in August, we should develop a medical affairs advisor board with some key needs. It's important to mention that when you need to do an advisor board in different topics and calling insight about the clinical evidence of different topics, it's important to have an innovative platform. But for example, Within3. The idea is to have the full participation, not participants contribute without taking airtime for each other. Participant engage in other topics. Participant get time to think before answering in the venue. And the measured pace of discussion help the moderators even more than the advisor. The next slide, please. We had some needs to address with our advisor board, deepening knowledge gaps and local management, and collect insights about the clinical evidence and therapeutic trends, as well as meet needs and expectations with new therapies. Additionally, we must review more topics about the different indication of the product. But it's very important to have more ACPs, more experts, and to have more time to discuss other topics. Next slide, please. But we also had some limitation. Usually the traditional advisor board has an agenda of 6 or 8 hours or more in a session where several topics are discussed. Then this can cause fatigue or lose focus on the important topics. The process may require an important time investment, long session, and the reduce of the focus on key issues or not give the required balance to each topics. The idea in this advisor board is to have balance in other topics and to deep in different topics about the different indication of the product. The next slide, please. So we move a step forward. We organized the first virtual advisor board in Latin America for Astellas, leaded for Colombia, completely virtual in different way with those both, two parts, asynchronous and synchronous part. The next slide. The digital experience can be fun and efficient. The challenge was demonstrate that the digital experience can be fun and efficient. The use of innovative, assertive virtual modalities with a focused agenda will create an adequate virtual engagement. The last experience in 2019 at board was a good experience, was face-to-face advisor board, but this year the experience was magical because we cover more topics. We had more experts in the same time in a platform asynchronous modality, and we can review different topics about the product. What's my magical experience? The next slide, please. We do a virtual mixed methodology with a first part, a synchronous part within 3 platforms where the key expert connect at different times of day for a week. And then we did a synchronous part where the key experts are meeting at the same time through web meeting in order to give a different dynamic to the advisor board to obtain deep insight, first of all, and more interaction between the ACP during the asynchronous part. The experience was really amazing because, for example, in the synchronous part, the key expert did engagement, did discussion about different topics based on the topics reviewed in the asynchronous part. It's very efficient for in this advisor board. The next slide, please. The impact was very interesting. We had more key experts included in the advisor board this year versus the traditional advisor board. We had 50% of key experts for other CEDAR intermediate cities. It means that the virtuality facilitates the involvement of doctors for several regions. For example, intermediate city Medellin, Cali, Barranquilla, etc. Additionally, the asynchronous adverts facilitate multidisciplinary engagement and interaction. We had 50% oncologists and 50% uro-oncologists. And this is most important part for me because the discussion were very interesting, multidisciplinary interaction between oncologists and uro-oncologists. The next slide, please. Other important result was the insight. We collect insight 7 times more than the conventional traditional advisor board. We had 324 contributions about 7 topics. It means we have double topics reviewed in this advisor board versus traditional advisor board in topics very important or controversial topic about, in this case, prostate cancer. For example, from prognosis, diagnosis, treatment, evidence, so current evidence, and different studies about the indication and the product. It's a very efficient way to obtain different insight about different topics. In this case, 7 topics were reviewed in this advisor board. The next slide, please. The virtual experience was amazing. You can see the scores about the virtual experience. The most important part is the key experts were interested in participating in another online session, 100%. And for example, the majority of the key experts comment that the platform were easy to use, very easy, and we had expert young and all ACPs, and the Spirit Web was easy to use the platform. The online session for the sample time to reflect on my responses before contributing to the discussion, 100% was very good results. And for example, one oncologist say me, I've never had a virtual experience before, and I found it very efficient and even fun. This is a great comment. Other, I thought that the virtual advisor board wouldn't work bad. On the contrary, it worked much better than a traditional meeting, all allowing us flexibility is very important for them in this time, and better organization. As a good comments about the from the key expert. Okay, the next slide. Thank you. Veronica?
Yeah, so thank you, Sandra. So as results, I will say that this mixture of asynchronous and synchronous was a smart way to gain better outcomes. So as Sandra was showing, we do not also twice the number of experts that participate versus the previous year, but we also had more voices to be heard. So we were able to make a mix and a combination that was more interesting and more complete. We also were able to help them to have deeper relations with key opinion leaders, because now they are using their experience to go further and to think about what they can do with those insights. And also the live discussion was more focused. And also in terms of budget, we help Astellas to have a budget reduction of 43%. So they were able to optimize resources, especially those related to travel and accommodation. Next, please. And what do we do to make this happen? Next, please. As a senior director in the client success team, I may say that our main goal is to make possible that every project is executed at an expert level while we partner with our clients to reduce internal workload. So in the case of Sandra and her team, they have our full support during the whole journey, from session planning, where we support them with the session design, the content design consulting, and the program development, to session launch, execution, and wrap up. During the session launch, we are responsible of loading the content, enroll participants, and we also do orientations to both advisors and moderators. This ensures that everyone is trained on how to use the platform features designed to boost collaboration in discussion before the session is open. And as Sandra was saying, also it helps us to bridge any gap if we are thinking about younger KOLs versus older KOLs, because sometimes you feel a little bit concerned about if older ACPs will be able to use the platform, but it's really used. And we also help you all the way around. Once the session is open, our team monitors the discussion and assists moderators with best practices and technology support if needed. And after the session closing, we run an advisory satisfaction survey, which is the one that Sandra showed. So this helps us to understand better their experience with the platform, and also where we need to improve for the next time. Clients also receive the complete transcriptions with the discussion right after the session closes, so they can use those insights right away, something that is really valuable. Or even you can use those during the synchronous phase if you are going to do that after using the platform. On the technical side, we also present a performance report with all the session key statistics. Next, please. So these services led us to maximize advisors' participation, advisor satisfaction, and also the amount of and value of the insights. In a nutshell, switching to a hybrid virtual allowed Astellas to gather a higher number of insights and of more quality if compared with a traditional ad board, and have more time for analysis. As said, transcripts are generated in real time. So in this case, Sandra was able to use the insights collected during the asynchronous phase to grant a more focused synchronous discussion with time to discuss the most controversial issues. So as she said, a magical experience, a very good experience for her and her team. Thank you. And now I hand it to Kristen again.
Kristen, you.
I'm so sorry about that. I wanted to thank you both for this presentation, and it was a really nice way to show how you're able to use that asynchronous session in combination with the live meeting to get you even more specific insights that you were looking for. So thank you for sharing that information with us. So now that these presentations have concluded, we have some time for some Q&A. So I'm going to be checking the chat, but first of all, Sandra and Sherri, if you're able to, I think it would be really helpful to share with everybody, what your initial maybe concerns were about conducting a virtual session using an asynchronous platform, and how you were able to overcome some of those potential challenges you thought you might have. If you could just provide a little bit of information about that, I think that would be really helpful for your colleagues to know.
Kristen, I can go first.
Sure.
I think one of the biggest challenges was just the uptake and participation. Of course, when it's a live sort of setting and everyone's in the room together, the moderator or the presenters can really pull in and engage with the attendees. But when it's being done on an online platform, you can't do that. So we've utilized different tactics to make sure that the engagement was consistent and, quite frankly, constant through the 2-week platform. So the uptick was definitely a concern. I think in general, the moderator's ability to go into the platform and ask questions and make sure that they're engaging with all the attendees is extremely important. And it had enabled the attendees to come in and comment and start sort of getting engaged. And it was almost a snowball effect. When participants and advisors started getting really into it, it just became constant through the 2-week process. And luckily, everyone had a really good time with it and had very positive things to say about it. And yeah, it was pretty much resolved from the moderator's participation.
Yeah, and speaking of the moderator's participation, so it is a little bit different moderating in an asynchronous platform than it is a live meeting. What did your moderators think of the experience, and how easy or difficult was it for them to transition to moderating into an asynchronous platform versus a live meeting? If you would be able to share maybe some of those insights, I think that would be really beneficial.
Yeah, so I actually moderated our program. I think one of the things about moderating that we'll have to keep in mind throughout something like an asynchronous session is that you have to kind of go in there and continue the conversation all day, every day. So that's one of the things to keep in mind. I started sort of going into a rabbit hole of being on the platform all day, every day. And it was a little, I had to tell myself to just kind of back away from it. And that's sort of the great advantage of having an asynchronous platform, is that the advisors are also coming in there whenever they want to and answering questions or commenting. But from a moderator's perspective is to make sure that you're receiving it, you're reading it, and engaging as much as possible. It's also really amazing from when you're doing sort of a live ad board. There are many times where we're bogged down by a specific comment or a side conversation, and we often don't get to some topics that we want to. And there are instances where you'll later on email the advisors and ask them for comments after they sort of leave. But in asynchronous session, you have every question you ever want to ask them sort of in front of you, not even from the medical affairs perspective, but also from other departments like in marketing and clinical. And you can ask every single one of them. And that's the beauty of the asynchronous program and moderation.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's a really excellent point. Colleagues participate as well, and it may be from behind the scenes, but you can all collaborate and decide what type of information you want to further probe on and gain more insights to, which you wouldn't really be able to do in a live meeting. So thank you for sharing that. That was a really great piece of advice. And Sandra, do you want to share, do you have any challenges that you thought you might encounter using this overtime session, and how that changed after you really began participating in this type of an engagement?
Yes, there are different challenge. In general, the experience is very interesting. The asynchronous part gives the opportunity to deep into different topics, analyze the answer every day. This is the important challenge, because you must review every day the comments, the responses, and encourage new conversation. This is other part different to the traditional advisor board, because you can start a new discussion based on the comments or the insight of the expert. Other important part is to define the priorities, because you can obtain a lot of comments each day, because the challenge is to analyze this comments, this insight, and prioritize each day which insight are very, very important, and based on this insight to start new discussion, new conversation. And the other part, very, very interesting, is the multidisciplinary discussion, because, for example, you can define, for example, oncologists and neuro-oncologists discussion, and to incentivize the discussion, interdisciplinary discussion with them, or to select, for example, the most important oncologists in prostate cancer, for example, and or oncologists, and to start one discussion with them, with special doctors. No, it's very, very important to prioritize, yeah, and analyze each day the insights.
Thank you for sharing that, Sherri. Very, very insightful, and those are some really great points that you mentioned. And I'm just really interested to know, now that both you and Sherri have, you know, these virtual engagements that you have completed, I'd like for you to share, like, what your overall experience was like, and how you would compare it to preparing and executing a live meeting.
I can take that question first. So the biggest differences from a live meetings perspective is obviously the interaction you're going to have with the advisors from a live perspective, and some of the nuances of being face-to-face versus in a virtual setting. I think that's something, of course, we can't replace. And the discussions, even the discussions that we have even outside the ad board setting, is so important for the ad board itself. The discussions you have with some of these top KOLs while you're having lunch, or the night before you're having drinks or dinner the side conversations about other things not related to the ad board. I think some of those are really, really valuable. And of course, from a digital perspective, we can't really have those. However, I think like Sandra had said, being able to focus and prioritize and do sort of this multidisciplinary conversation, those are some of the things I think are really beneficial for a virtual ad board perspective, because you can have an extremely extensive conversation and either narrow or expand further, and you can have this in a 2-week time frame, which is much longer than maybe a 4 or 6 hour live ad board that we would normally get. So you're really digging their brains for a prolonged period of time, which is a great advantage from an asynchronous perspective.
And, one of the things that I wanted to ask you, based on what you were just talking about, when you're conducting a live meeting or a meeting in person, do you typically see where you may have 1 or 2 people dominating the conversation? Because one of the things that we hear is with asynchronous engagement, it allows more people the opportunity to engage and maybe speak up who normally wouldn't have done so in a live meeting. Is that something that you noticed at all? I would just be curious to know if you saw that maybe you had more overall engagement from your advisors in a virtual setting as compared to a live meeting.
Yeah, absolutely. We actually just had a live ad board over Zoom, and that sort of still happened in a Zoom meeting, which is quite interesting from a sort of a human interaction perspective. But yes, absolutely. When you have a live ad board, there are some more dominating personalities, and there are some KOLs who might be just shyer and not speak up as much. From an asynchronous perspective, the moderator can actually ask specific individuals by in the comment box, and that sort of, if the conversation is only within 2 or 3 people, the moderator can go in there and what do you think about this, and sort of tag the others, and it sort of forces them to speak up because they're getting a notification on their side saying, Sherri has asked you a question, would you like to answer, or please go and see the comment or something like that, right? So it sort of forces them to engage, and that's nice. That's nice to have. And of course, in a live setting, you can also do that, but it is a little bit more difficult. So it does play a really nice role in the asynchronous session when it comes to sort of the one individual that might either interrupt or overtake the conversation.
Thank you for sharing that. And Sandra, what about you? How would you describe your overall experience using the hybrid approach, where you were able to conduct a virtual session using the asynchronous platform and a live meeting?
Okay, the role is very important. The moderators are a key piece in the successful of the asynchronous part. For me, the goals of the objectives as a leader in this asynchronous advisor board is very important to have clear objectives, to plan the agenda with the key topics, speak with the doctors before is a very important in your role as a moderator or lead of this advisor board, and explain the methodology, explain from the technical methodology and what is expected of them, what is expected of their participation in this advisor board. It's very important to read the digest provided within 3 each day, to encourage the participation of all experts, especially those we have not participated much. It's a good information, the digits, because you realize the participation, the comments of all key experts, and the most important part is to encourage to all experts to participate in this in the platform. No? On the platform is very important.
Thank you, Sandra. And my next question is for Sherri. And Sandra, I will probably follow up with the same question to you, but how do you see yourself incorporating asynchronous engagement once the COVID pandemic has passed? You know, live meetings will be able to continue in person. So I was just curious on how you expect to see asynchronous discussions continue post-COVID pandemic.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think from a departmental perspective, when we look at the medical priorities and strategy, even after COVID, I think we'll be utilizing an asynchronous session continuously. We'll probably do a mixed approach where we will start having live ad boards again. However, we will also continue to have these asynchronous types of programs because I think it brings in a lot of advantages and insights that sometimes the live ad board doesn't create. I also think from a cultural perspective, the ad board live setting is definitely shifting. Even after sort of travel would be allowed again, there might be some advisors and KOLs who prefer a virtual platform and would continue to engage with us from a virtual perspective instead of traveling. And I think from a departmental perspective, that's also great as well, as some of us might not be able to travel. If there's some restrictions, even from a state-to-state perspective. So from looking at from that, I think we'll continue to incorporate this type of setting into our strategy and mix it up, definitely mix it up with the live ad boards as well.
Thank you. And Sandra, so you're based in the Latin American region, which obviously is different than the US, especially with COVID and restrictions. So curious to know how you anticipate using asynchronous sessions moving forward once you know, people are able to travel and to conduct live in-person meetings.
Yes, it's a good question, because in this advisor board, it was a completely virtual board. We realized that the cost of travels, hotels, etc., was very low. The principal or the key cost was the fees of the doctors. But this is a good point, because the idea is to invest in the event, in the doctors are now in travels or other things. We will maintain the virtual advisor board in this time, pandemic time and post-pandemic, because beyond the pandemic, these methodologies have demonstrated efficiency. It's the key word, efficiency, and higher level of participation. For example, the last advisor board, the traditional advisor board, I had 6 key experts face-to-face. And this year, with the new methodology, within 3, I had 15 key experts. The participation was very interesting, and this methodology to facilitate the participation of other experts in the other cities. For example, this year I had experts of the coast, the Colombian coast, and the other intermediate cities, doctors who I know this year. I did the engagement this year through the interaction, the advisor board, the platform, etc. Facilitate the engagement and the participation. This is very important.
Thank you. And my next question is actually for my colleagues, Silke and Veronica. I know I touched on this a little bit earlier in the presentation about the different ways that companies are using an asynchronous platform for engagement, but I'd really like to hear how you have seen some of the different clients that you work with using the asynchronous platform in addition to virtual advisory boards.
Well, I've had the fortune of really spanning the spectrum at this point as far as the product pipeline goes. Right now, being conference season, we have a lot of clients who are doing conference huddles internally and externally, which is a very interesting use case for us. I've also had the opportunity to work on some patient engagement advisory boards, which has been really interesting, especially in light of COVID right now. Some advisory boards where they're actually engaging patients on their overall journey and experience as it relates to the disease state. And then, for a lot of internal collaboration and team strategizing, budget development, and things of that sort. So those things, are just some of the use cases I've had the experience with lately. Veronica?
Yes, in the Latin region, what we are seeing a lot is the hybrid model that Sandra used. So most of the teams are using the platform to refine the conversation and then move into the live discussion to finalize that discussion. We are also seeing a lot of publications planning work using our platform. So some teams are, realizing that they can short the time they spend doing white papers, and several of them are focused on COVID. So some of the teams in LATAM are working to develop COVID guidelines to treatment or any sort of white paper focusing the region. So they are able to have experts from all around LATAM discussing. That is something that they wouldn't be able to do before the platform. Another use case is like Latin America guidelines. So in terms of, some teams are also discussing in a regional level how to address treatment for a specific disease, and they are comparing how it is done in Colombia versus Brazil versus Mexico. So this is a very interesting use case too.
So Veronica, both you and Silke had mentioned that you have clients who are using an asynchronous platform to be able to develop documents, whether it's developing a manuscript, or Silke had mentioned working on budgets. Do you mind just explaining a little bit in more detail about how that actually works on the platform where you're able to collaborate on a document together?
Sure. So you can do this in different ways. You can use the document annotation. So you can upload a document that can be a PDF or a PowerPoint or even a Word document, and you can ask the authors and the advisors to contribute, so they can review this document and include, like, it would be like a sticky note, so you can see all their suggestions. We are using this a lot to review treatment algorithms, for example. So we upload an algorithm, and the advisors start including their comments on that. Or you can use it as a document that is online and everyone can edit. So you can, being the 10 authors, for example, they will be, giving their suggestions and editing real time. And this really saves a lot of time in terms of back and forth documents, going through emails that maybe are lost or, you know, forgotten. So you know that the version that everyone is seeing is the last one. So this is.
Thank you for providing that context. That's really helpful and really explains, you know, the way that you're able to create these manuscripts. And Silka, I'm not sure if there's anything else that you would like to add based on the sessions that you're running for internal sessions using these features.
So yeah, primarily in that, you know, for one of our clients, we have them updating documents for collaboration on a monthly basis. So, you know, Excel spreadsheets that change from one month to the next, and inviting teams to come in and update those from a budgetary standpoint. If there are presentations and development going through, and again, providing updates on a regular basis so that they can continue to get additional feedback and input from teams. And the great thing there as well is the opportunity for version control, because you're not just having things change, not knowing who's gone in and done what over what period of time, but you have that record over an extended period of time.
Thank you, Silka. And I know that we are coming down to our time, but I just wanted to end on this one final question for both Sandra and Sherri. For any of your colleagues who have dialed in and they are currently, you know, viewing this discussion and presentation, what one piece of advice would you share with them if they're considering using an asynchronous platform for virtual engagement?
Sandra, do you want to go first?
Okay. Okay. The one advice maybe to have prior or previous meetings with the expert in order to explain clearly the methodology. And other advice is to have several meetings with the focal point of within three. To have very clearly the goals, the agenda, the questions. Beyond the question, is very important to have very clear the goals of the advisor board. If you have very clear your expectation and goals, you can do assertive questions and documents, etc. This is my advice.
Thank you. And I thought that key part that you mentioned about really thoroughly explaining to your advisors what to expect is really important, because for a lot of them, this may be their first time participating in an asynchronous or overtime type of session. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, Kristen, just quickly too, my one advice would be, if you're for the medical affairs departments and teams, to, before sort of going live with an asynchronous program, is to have everyone within your organization, whether it's internal stakeholders as well as the leadership, come in and sort of participate from their own perspective of what they would also like out of the program. Because I think one of the great things that we learned is we were able not only to answer all of our questions, but get to sort of other internal teams' questions and handle some of the other insights and information that they need. If you do it ahead of time and kind of gather and corral everything that you need prior, the moderator can really utilize the list of questions and plug it in sort of when he or she see fits, especially because the conversation is continuing every day, all day at times. When you prepare ahead of time, it's easier for the moderator to plug in some of those extra questions and, again, kind of continue the conversation and make sure you're engaging everyone continuously for 2 weeks or however long they decide.
Thank you. And my overall thanks to Sandra and Sherri and Silka and Veronica. This was a really informative session, and I hope all of those who were able to dial in and attend found this to be very beneficial. and really explain some of the best practices for engaging in virtual engagement, especially utilizing overtime sessions or an asynchronous platform. So thank you all very much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.